Hey there, Shafer Minnick, high performance coach, and I'm here to talk to you about turning adversity into a good time. This is truly one of life's greatest arts if you are able to really master this concept. And it's something that is cross-cutting, not something that's only applicable to the business world, not something that's only used in personal development, something that's really a tool you can use at any time, right? One of my favorite quotes from Oprah is, you want the friend that's going to ride with you, not just when you have the limo, but when the limo breaks down and you have to walk to take the bus. And so I think that that really encapsulates a lot of what we think about when we talk about dealing with life's adversity, right? And making something fun out of it. So I'm going to give you 4 tips on how to turn those adverse situations into a good time. And right now, as I'm recording this, we're in the middle of shelter in place in DC in the coronavirus pandemic time. And so a lot of us are getting really fatigued and just frustrated, especially as we're coming up on a holiday weekend and want to be able to live our lives. And so how can we turn this situation into something good? So four things that are specific that I think. Number 1 is learn how to gain control and really control the narrative. So this is something I remember. I was just talking to my mom about this a couple of weeks ago. When we were kids, there was one particularly terrible fight that my father had been very physically abusive to my mom, and it had started late at night, and the police ended up being called. And so the advice was for my parents to separate for the evening. And so my father refused to leave the house. So my mom took us, and I was maybe 5 or 6 years old at the time. I wasn't that old, and my brother was like an infant. And so I remember us going to stay in this hotel, but the hotel, no, it was a motel. It was kind of shitty. And when mom and I were discussing the story a couple of weeks ago, she said, I was actually afraid for us to stay in that motel because it was kind of seedy, but it was all I could afford. And what I remember about that night was not the police being called, not the trauma. I remember that motel had constellations, these like glow in the dark constellations that lit up, and that mom and I were lying in bed looking up at the ceiling trying to see what the constellations were and what kind of a game that was. I remember falling asleep to that, and I remember the next day asking if I could have those in my room at home. So mom really took this bad situation and made this fun game out of it. So I leave you with that for this one example. How can you turn when you're faced with adversity, when you're faced with something that's trying and challenging? How can you make that into something fun? How can you try to gamify it? How can you try to make it the best that you absolutely can? The second tip that I can give you is to not try to control it, right? And that might not be what you were expecting to hear, but this is something I was guilty of for a long time. I tried to really like wrestle and control and be the one that was gonna get people to change, get situations to change, get a different outcome. And really at the end of the day, sometimes you just need to understand situations and people for who and what they are, and then make a decision for yourself. Like, does this serve me or does this not serve me? Is this something that I want to keep in my life, or is this something that just the adversity is not going to help me anymore? The next thing the tip number 3 is, how can you learn from the bad situation? How can you say, okay, what is the lesson I'm supposed to get out of this right now, right? So for me, one of the most embarrassing and difficult things that I've had to contend with is declaring bankruptcy after my last business did not turn out the way that I thought it was going to. And so that really caused a reframe for me where I had to say, okay, the lesson I needed to learn from this was that I let my hubris, I let my ego get in the way. I tried to make the thing too big when we weren't ready. And so that put me in a compromised financial position. And I won't do that again. And so I know it might seem tough when you're in the middle of it, but stop and try to ask yourself, what's the lesson I'm supposed to learn? How can I come out of this feeling better, feeling greater? And the last thing I want you to do is I want you to picture yourself getting stronger. I want you to really close your eyes and visualize it, right? I talk a lot about visualizations. And so it's so important for you to see yourself on the other side of the lesson, for you to see yourself on the other side of the situation and say, I'm not going to let that happen to me again. I'm going to read the data going forward. I'm going to see where the situation is leading me, and I'm not going to do it. For me, the situation that recently kind of came up is I broke up with my ex. We've been broken up for 3 years now, but I literally just called one of my best friends, Tiffany, today, and said, I don't really think I've dealt with a lot of this stuff. Unfortunately, during the last year of our relationship, he lied and said that he had cancer, and it was something I believed, and it was something that I didn't really process through, and a lot of my friends knew after the fact that I had talked to them about it, but I didn't know how to handle it, and so I was so consumed with making that relationship work and like sticking in there, and that was what I thought I was supposed to do, that I couldn't see how horrible that was. But now on the other side of it, I can see how strong it's made me. And as I go out and embark on relationships, I'm very aware of people's intent and what they're bringing to the table. And so that situation, as horrible and deranged as it was, is something that really made me stronger. So that's what I want to leave you with. 4 tips to turn adversity into something fun, or into something that you can learn from, you can grow from, you can change from. So I'd love to hear your feedback. I'd love to hear your comments. Shoot me a DM or drop comments below, and I will be in touch soon.